Welcome to the Sales Mindset Podcast, where we talk about sales and a positive mindset for your success. What are we going to talk about today, Ryan?
So today, keeping in line with the current trend on our last couple issues here, we're going to talk about negative experiences.
Oh.
We talked a little bit about rejections, but we're going to call this an open letter. Talk about some stories of some bad experiences that we've had.
All right, this was your idea, so I think you should go first.
Yeah, so the first one, this actually goes all the way back to high school. I thought about this ahead of time because I think it's probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been in a sales call before. This was more of a follow-up post-sale sales call. But this was back when I was in high school. It was my senior year of high school, and I was selling advertisements for the newspaper. And there was this boutique thrift store type of situation the next town over. The towns are very integrated, so it wasn't that far away. But the next town over that tried to advertise in the newspaper. And we sold them in the inserts package, which was only $75. And we would offer to pay to print their inserts they would pay for it if we would print it for them. But she wanted to print them on her own. And did so, printed all 1,600 of them on her home printer, which was crazy expensive, as you can imagine, using a home printer to print these full page size inserts that went into our newspaper. And then we had to spend the whole day stuffing them, which was brutal. It was the first and last time I ever sold an insert ad for the newspaper, but it wasn't terribly effective. It with all due respect to her, I'm sure that she thought it was, potentially good advertising move for her, but it was also a high school newspaper. And it was likely that maybe 1, 2, or 3 students would go over there and, take the coupon. And I think maybe 1 or 2 did, is what she said, but it wasn't the most effective campaign. But it was also only $75. It's a really low rate. It's more so to kind of support a high school newspaper, but I definitely know why she was upset. Yeah, I guess maybe she was expecting some more reward for it. But we went over there and just to deliver a newspaper to her and say, thank you so much for advertising with us. If you'd like to again, let us know. We're running 3 more editions throughout the rest of the year here. And she ended up crying in the conversation while we were talking. She was like, that only 2 people came with the insert to buy stuff.
Out of
1,600. We printed 1,600.
That's actually pretty typical.
I think it was pretty reasonable personally, but she definitely didn't get her money back. She said, I spent almost $500 on printing those inserts. And I'm like, how, for one, but also I'm so sorry to hear that. There's 2 sides of me. I was genuinely very empathetic in the sense of like, wow, this struggling small business just spent $575 allegedly. I don't even know how it's possible, but $575 on the advertisement and the cards. But now she's here literally crying in front of us about the situation, and I did not know what to say. I was 17, and I do not know what to say to you. And then the other side of me was a little bit in my mind, a little snarky, like, it cost us $500 to print our 1,600 copy 12-page edition of the newspaper. How did you spend $500 on these inserts? But that's neither here nor there. We ended up keeping a relationship with her, actually, not for the newspaper, for my own stuff specifically at high school. But it was definitely the worst. I think it was the most negative experience I had while I was while I was selling for that. And also probably the most uncomfortable. Maybe not the angriest I've been around or like the most, exceptionally upset, but I was very uncomfortable. I was 17 and this woman was crying in her store about she didn't get any hits on the newspaper ad.
Well, there's a lesson here.
Yeah.
May I?
You may.
Okay. I know we talked about.
Yeah, we did. We talked about asking permission for
the lesson is management of expectations.
Yeah.
And I don't know if very many newspapers do this. You can talk about it because you've not just done your little thing, but here. No one, when I purchased advertising, ever said, here's what your likely response rate is going to be. I just inherently knew it by experience, but I don't know if very many newspapers ever think about that.
No.
Your response rate on newspaper advertising isn't going to be 50%. You get
especially nowadays.
1,000 impressions. If you get 1,000 impressions, you're not going to get 500 calls.
Yeah.
Visits to your website. You might get 10. right? That's still not bad, a 1% turnaround rate on that. But is it the job, and I ask this rhetorically, of the publication to discuss what a marketing what an advertising or promotional funnel looks like from you're advertising to this many people? We're placing the ad and giving you the eyes.
Yeah.
It's your ad's responsibility.
Yeah.
To do the rest of the work.
I know it was rhetorical, but in that sect, so I did some print advertising and digital advertising sales for a little bit, and universally, and I'm pretty sure this is just industry-wide, nationwide, you talk about the input. I can, especially if it was digital advertising, I can effectively guarantee that this is going to be in front of 1,600 people for the next, or every day for 5 days. That is what you say.
Exactly. That's what you're selling.
Yeah. And then they say, how many people click on the ads? And then I will say, I couldn't tell you. It does depend on how effective the ad is. The average for all of our advertisements is a 2% click rate on the advertisements. And that is the extent of promises that can be made.
Do you remember her ad?
I do remember her ad.
Was it a good ad?
It was okay. It wasn't anything particularly impressive. It was a small business, but it also wasn't bad. I think actually the inserts were the most effective ads that we had personally, because they fall out of the newspaper, and it's like the only thing in the newspaper that falls out at you. So
yeah, freestanding inserts. We do that? I don't remember if I ever took any of those out. So, all right. Any other thoughts on that?
No.
Okay. Mine might not generate as much discussion, but I'm going to go back to my first bad experience, which would be door-to-door sales. And it wasn't sales, but it was fundraising, which is even worse.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use one example, but the one example is really a broad stroke of what seemed to suck about it. So, first of all, door-to-door sales in any environment can be really rough. So I was doing this in the Philadelphia area, and if it was the summer, I was getting drenched. It was hot. It actually can get hotter up in Philadelphia in the summer than it does here in Gainesville.
I've heard that. I don't remember what the reason is, but there's like a whole mini
city holds on to this to the heat because of concrete. And so, and in the winter, of course, when you're knocking on a door, that in any temperature starts to hurt. In fact, there were some people who have been doing so long that they had bone calluses on their knuckles.
Wow.
But when it's 10 degrees, 20 degrees, as it could sometimes get, so cold that the ink on the pen that you're trying to get people to sign up for things actually freeze. That hurts.
Yeah.
Like, you learn to, if they don't have door knockers, to like bring a quarter or something so you can knock on the door without destroying your knuckles. And of course, if you're wearing gloves, that just sounds like, right? So couched in that is the people that would just slam the door in your face. So it was for an environmental organization. One of the things that appealed to me about this environmental organization is that they were nonpartisan. And though there is still a partisan tilt to environmentalism, even then, 2 years ago, I still, even though I cared about the environment, still independent in my politics.
Yeah.
So my hallmark of the rude person is when I said, "Hello, my name's Dennis. I'm with your local community group, such and such environmental organization." And they just looked at me, said, "Oh, you look like a Democrat to me." Slammed the door in my face. I'm like, "But I'm not."
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm not a Republican either.
That's funny.
I was just sitting there like, that was rude.
Yeah. How many did you get through where I said, "I'm Dennis with," and the conversation was already over?
Well, actually, never.
Oh, really?
If we were going to go that far, what would happen is they just would ignore their door.
That's true.
And so, and there are a couple times when I'm like, someone's in there. I'm knocking, not really thinking about the fact that they're not answering the door for you.
Yeah.
Like,
they've already clocked you.
How many times you knock? They know that you're selling something, even if it's not a physical product. You're selling an idea. They don't want to talk to you. And of course, I wasn't thinking with their perspective. Some of them might not have felt safe.
Yeah.
It's West Philadelphia. So within that, there was this issue of people just being outright rude to you. And it would only be these little short experiences where you had someone slamming the door in your face, but still, it hurt.
Yeah. And they stack up too.
They do.
And the theme of rejection from what we talked about recently.
Exactly. But the lesson, as I learned, is that they did me a favor. Instead of listening to my whole spiel and be like, well, I don't know, blah, 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 or trying to debate me, which is even worse, they did me a favor because I could just move on to the next house.
Yeah.
And I could get more houses in and more likely to find that particular win than the person that would listen to me for the sake of listening to me, only to later be rude to me.
Yeah. Well, it's much better to get if it's going to be a no, rather like you just say it right now. Just end it now. That's okay. Like I won't be upset.
Yeah.
I'll be more upset if we walk all the way to the 11th hour and then you say no.
Yeah, and then it's the same lesson that I talk to my students when they do their thing for the project classes. You're going to be most upset and most hurt by these individuals that are the rudest to you, but they are doing you the greatest favor, saving you all of that time that could be wasted.
Sure. Another story.
Your turn.
So this is the second one. I only picked out 2 for today. This one is less so a bad experience from the person I was selling to, but rather almost a collateral damage. So I used to do leasing for a property management company, and part of the process is people call in or they see a leasing ad and they call the office and you schedule them for a tour. And our little CRM that we had by default always had the date for today, the current day. So if you wanted to schedule a day for further out, you had to manually change the day to a further date and the time and whatnot. But if you were to, by default, just log it, it'll say today for 1 p.m. So I went into it to go put in this tour for somebody who's going to come and check out the property. And I set it for the right time, but I forgot to change the day, which it happens sometimes. It's just the way it is. And then what it does, it pings both the person that currently lives there and the person who wants to check out the place. Like, tour has been scheduled for the property, this address, at this time. And it happens sometimes. And usually what happens is the tenant will call and be like, hey, can you not come today? Oh, that was my mistake. Yeah, I put it in for the wrong day. Okay, no problem. And then they hang up. But this wasn't even the tenant. It was their dad who called, and I answered the phone. I was in a good mood that morning, too. I remember. I'll never forget. Yeah, I was in such a good mood. And I answered the phone. They're like, hi, I'm, John Smith for this unit. And I'm like, oh, yeah, nice to meet you. How can I help you? He's like, what the hell is wrong with you? I'm like, okay. Do you want to start over? What's going on? Like, I saw that you scheduled a tour for 11 o'clock for my daughter's unit. And I said, yeah. It was like, yeah, like, what the hell is wrong with you? I'm like, is there a problem? And he's like, it's for today. I'm like, sir, it's 11:30. The tour would have already happened. Like, clearly there's a mistake. He's like, clearly nothing. Like, you shouldn't talk to me that way, yada, yada, yada. And he was really pissing me off. And I was like, could you just relax? And he kept interrupting me. So I said, all right, if you have something constructive, just give me a call back. And I hung up on it.
I think that's a proper reaction. Something like that.
It definitely was. I didn't yell at him, but that was like, I think it's the most angry I've ever been on a phone call at that job. I hung up on people twice ever. And that was one of the times. We had a policy that was if somebody's being unreasonable, like, you can hang up.
I like that policy.
Yeah.
That we can adopt that for Canasta.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So did he call back?
No, they never do. They never do.
Okay.
They got to be really hell-bent to call back.
So why? So did, I guess, he get the ping, or did his daughter? I mean, you probably don't know. But...
So at the program, depending on how you have it's hard to explain, but on the back, if you have it structured a certain way, it'll ping everybody associated with the unit. And this was like the cosigner. Okay. So we had to set up for that one incorrectly. So it went to the tenant and the cosigner for the unit. And he called the bitch. It was like 60 seconds after I placed the tour. Meaning like the tour would have already happened. Like it was like for 11. It was 11:30.
Come on.
No, I know. It was sort of like, what the hell is wrong with him? Like, it would have already happened. Like, clearly, could you imagine?
I mean, at that point in time, what the hell's the matter?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. No, it was insane. And the best part was that the person who lived there, nicest person ever. I loved that. One of my favorite tenants that we worked with. Loved her so much.
Mm. There's no lesson from that. People are just assholes.
Mm-hmm.
It's my rule number 2. Rule number 1 is people are stupid.
Yeah.
I think that actually applies here too.
I do have a lesson in there. As long as you keep your cool and you respond with respect, you will always feel so much better about the situation.
And I think you were as respectful as the person deserved.
Yeah,
to be quite honest with you.
Because then it just becomes fun.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just becomes
so
fun.
there's the laugh at you.
Yeah.
Instead of the last one. Okay, so my turn on this. This was a very hard lesson. So there was a magazine that needed some web design. And this is back when it was Knaz Creative Services. Mm-hmm. This is the first incarnation of my business. And I designed a fantastic website for this person. This is 2003 or 2004.
Gotcha. So fantastic by 2003, 2004 set.
Yeah. You've seen my older designs, I see. And the time that I spent on it. Mm-hmm. So $5,000.
That charge?
That was the charge.
Wow.
That was the charge. That was 5 months of my mortgage that I was counting on.
Yeah.
Because I had just started. Never paid. Took the website.
Yeah.
Never paid. Excuse me. So that is a hard lesson for an entrepreneur to learn. So this is entrepreneurial sales, not just, it's one thing if you're working for a company where they can absorb that, you might not get your commission.
Yeah.
But this was, when that happened, I'm like, oh, great. I could spend all this time I didn't think of it. I never thought of myself as in sales at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
Not go out and get clients. I can actually get this work done.
Yeah.
And I'll be good. And when I finish this, I'll be able to find other clients.
Yeah. You'll have the time, like the breathing room to build up your pipeline a little bit.
Yeah. And no.
Yeah.
No. And so, you have to understand early in my business, there was electricity getting shut off. There were foreclosure notices. So this was like, wow.
Yeah.
So hard lesson till the check's in the bank. So after that, I learned, except for very, very important clients who I've learned to trust over time, there's always a deposit involved. At the very least, a deposit involved. And then you don't deliver the final product until everything else is cleared.
Yeah.
And I think I'm a little bit better about judging potential clients. It's still going to happen. It still will happen where one of us is going to pull someone in and they just won't pay.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not even really worth, depending on the circumstances. Sometimes it's too much to even go after them or start a whole war over it.
No. I mean, and this person was based out in New York City. So
it's almost impossible.
Talking about, it wasn't really happening.
Mm-hmm.
So but that's something that's going to happen. You're counting on a giant commission check, or if you're entrepreneurial, you're counting on the entire thing.
Yeah.
And they don't end up paying.
I just took on a job doing a website as well, actually, for $2,000, and we did like a half upfront type of deal. Mm-hmm. And the website is effectively done. We're having some trouble like final communication, but I trust that the other half is going to come in when the website is delivered. But you're definitely stronger than me. If I would have been stiff for $2,000, I would have been making some waves, or at least trying to, probably fruitlessly. But I definitely wouldn't have been able to swallow it, even though I would have ended up in the same place.
Yeah, and this is $5,000. 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
So $2,000 for a website?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about how much you should be charging.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I think it was a pretty fair price.
Okay. Well, in fairness, it's a little easier to design a website today.
Yeah, that is true.
These were hand-coded sites.
Yeah, this is not a hand-coded site.
Yeah. All right. Okay. You're up.
I actually don't have one off the top of my head, but we could switch it to a more positive story.
I have one more negative.
Okay.
And this is my mistake. Mm-hmm. This is me butchering it, and this is actually very recently. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a cautionary tale that no matter how good you think you are you immune from the problems that we talk about? Mm-hmm. And so I ended up ghosting a potential customer.
Oh, no.
And thankfully, it hasn't been fatal, but it could have been.
Yeah.
And it all came out of fear. So customer approached for a custom solution for what they wanted to do. And at the time, it was so early in me developing what I'm doing here. And it was before I found a certain fire as well, which we've spoken about offline. And I was like, I got to develop this. And before I knew it, too much time had passed. And I realized that even though I had complete buy-in from this particular prospect, I had potentially damaged my goodwill. And because of that, it created this fear of following up with them, which doubled the time.
Oh, I see.
Now, thankfully, this is also someone who I have a good personal relationship with.
It's the perfect storm, though. Not completing the relationship or continuing that.
And actually, that made it worse. I actually feel so bad. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, it didn't affect, because this client or customer, not a client yet, is growing so fast. It turns out that it worked out for the better because their needs had changed as well.
Yeah.
Had it been, we're talking potential 6-figure impact on what we're doing here. So thankfully, no major impact on that. But the idea here is that, and the cautionary tale is, I don't care how good you think. Here I am, a sales trainer.
Yeah.
Here I am with all the experience. I'm still subject to the same mistakes that anyone else, and everyone is subject to those particular mistakes. And it really means that you have to be on your game throughout throughout your entire life, right? Yeah. Always be humble, because it's always possible for you to make those mistakes.
You actually reminded me of a very similar mistake that I made just a couple weeks ago about on my real estate sales side of things. I had been contacted by a buyer through the passive funnel that I had with the brokerage, who they were looking to get into investment real estate and wanted to connect with me to basically, as a consultant, like the expertise, knowing the market, and trying to connect them with different real estate.
So a solid inbound lead.
Yeah, a really strong inbound lead. I very rarely, number one, do inbound leads turn out to be so fruitful. But I talked to them quite a few times. We actually built up a decent relationship. Talked to them on the phone a few times, Zoom a couple times, and had an idea of what they're trying to do. They were going to, over the next 2 years, trying to be picking up a few different properties. They were looking at multiplexes specifically. So I was pretty excited about it. It's a big lead for a real estate agent. Somebody's looking to pick up multiple multiplexes. So talking to him on the phone, and finally, this was actually over the course of 3 months, because he needed to liquidate some stuff, or like put together some more money before like engaging in his first buy. So this was just a few weeks ago. And I was going to contact him in the middle of September. And he actually contacted me first, which never happens. He said at the beginning of September. And he was saying, so it's been about 3 months now. I wanted to check in and see if we're ready to do this thing. I'm like, absolutely. I was about to say that to you. I'm so glad that you contacted me first. And I went online and I found some listings for them that were topical and relevant, and was prepared for our sales meeting. It was a Saturday morning. We were just going to talk on Zoom because he was in a different city. And I didn't send a confirmation message, and he didn't show up to the meeting. And I'm going to recap afterwards, like each step where I feel like I genuinely made an error and why I ended up losing this sale. I didn't send any message, and then he ended up missing the meeting because it was a Saturday morning at like 9 a.m. or something like that. And I ended up sending him a really long email with the listings and explanation why I thought they were good, and the contract that I wanted them to sign for like an engagement letter, the equivalent for a lawyer, to start working together. And he ended up responding to my text that I had also sent him. He's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for missing the meeting." He was still fully 100% in. He was so sorry for missing the meeting. That's on me. Well, let's figure this out. Let me look over the listings, and let's meet tomorrow morning. And he looked over the listings and sent me a text that said, "Hey, I noticed that we had actually already seen all of these listings ourselves. Do you not have access to information that we don't?" And the answer, the truth is, not really. A real estate agent doesn't really have access to more listings than the average person. If you have an internet connection and the ability to look for it, you can probably find everything a real estate agent can. Maybe you'll get more details, or maybe something will get put on the MLS that doesn't get put onto Zillow and all the other sites. But I responded to him frankly to try to mitigate the expectations. Like, no. It's not surprising that you've already found these, but what would separate it is you have somebody in your corner to find the best deal for your budget and what you're trying to do with your investment strategy, as well as negotiate the price. Like, let's talk about, I hear your concern though. Why don't we sit down and talk about it tomorrow morning? And then same situation. He said, all right, great. Let's talk then. And I didn't send any confirmation message after that. And we ended up not meeting, and then he ghosted me. And I walk away from that where maybe it's not inherently my responsibility to track every step of the meeting, but typically what I would do is, if the meeting's at 9, at 7:30 or 8, hey, are we still going to meet at 9? and check in, or call if they don't respond by 8:30. Just make sure that we're good to go before we go into that meeting.
Yeah.
And because I think that's genuinely the reason that he missed the first one. And if he hadn't missed the first one, I would have shown not in person, but in real time, these listings, and then covered objections as they came, as opposed to having the objections fester with himself and his partner. And eventually that tanked the deal. And not only did I do that once, but I did it a second time. And we ended up never meeting to be able to handle these objections, and they ended up falling apart and tanking the deal.
How long ago did this happen?
This is just a couple weeks ago. This is the middle of September. Was it October 7th now?
Okay.
So this was 3 weeks ago.
So lesson learned. You add that into your flow.
Yeah.
Into your processes.
Yeah.
To make sure that happens.
A certain procedure for pre-following up, I guess.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. All right. What's the positive?
The positive.
Not from that, but you said you had a positive experience.
The positive stories are a lot shorter, but no, I just specifically remember a group of really, very forward college students who had done their research. This is when I was a leasing agent. They'd done their research and they knew that type of house that they wanted, and they had asked to tour 3 different places. And then I was their leasing agent, went 1, 2, 3, all back to back, checked them out, and they said, awesome, we want this one. And then there was an advocate for the group, almost like a team leader for them, and I was the point of contact. This was in 2022. I don't know. It doesn't even sound like a crazy story, but it was to me, because especially dealing with college students, it just always got out of control with these leases where he would call me and be like, hey, Brian, we have this, and this piece of documentation. Is there anything else we need? No, make sure you bring this, though, as well for the deposit. And arranged everybody. Everybody got there exactly on time. They had some questions and objections. They read through the lease all the way, asked really educated questions. We signed the lease, and I gave them their cosigner forms that they needed to get filled out, and they had it to me within 3 days, which is unheard of. And I remember being so happy about the lease. I had a grin on my face the entire time I was doing it. Like I love these kids. Like, there's buyers who knew what they wanted, or I guess tenants who knew what they wanted and made it happen. Were communicative and maintained a positive, equal relationship.
And I'm sure they hopefully have learned by being good customers, they get good services.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would still now, I believe they still live as I'd bend over backwards to make sure that their problems are solved.
Yeah, I found that's one thing that's important for renting, I think. And I found that out, that if you treat your leasing office and your especially maintenance staff with respect, they will go all over the place for you.
Yeah,
get your
for sure.
security deposit back, even if you've damaged the place.
Yeah, absolutely.
My positive is to balance out what I started with my negative, and that's the door-to-door, right? Mm-hmm. There were those people that are absolutely rude, and I talked about those temperature extremes. Well, there was almost every single day that we would go out, there was always a door that was just so positive, whether they donated or not. They'd be like, come on in, have some soup, have some food, have some hot
coffee. Yeah, that's nice.
Have some, we still have dinner out, have some food if you'd like to. If it was cold, it was hot cocoa. If it was hot out, it would be water. It would be cooling off, the equivalent of someone who puts out food for their Amazon drivers these days. And that's how I learned to do it for mine. And it shows you that just because there are some bad people out there or some rude people, there's always those individuals that are good.
Yeah.
And I love knowing that there's good people out there. That just makes me feel good. Even if they're not buyers, still they're good prospects.
Yeah. I think it's easy to lose track of, but I do think that most people are good people and everybody's just trying their best.
Absolutely. Even the people that might have been rude, it's just understanding they're having a bad day.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
That's all we got today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.